Okay, so I have some people with a vested interest here today. So, okay, so some of us have been hearing in the news.
We're allowed to vent against the...
Okay, there was the head of an unpopular. First of all, thank you to Rabbi Ariel Ovadia and the Beis Havad Halacha Journal for providing me with the Maramakomos, the sources, and this topic. So in the news recently was a CEO. The name sounds a little Jewish, but he's not Jewish. Martin Shkreli, I think. Oh. He's not Jewish. Okay, I need that one, but there are others around. Okay? There should be extra copies around? Yes. Okay? That there was a certain drug that he had a slight price increase. It went $7,000. It went from it went from $13, right? He added I think 10%, so it became $14.30. No, actually it went to $750, right? Which is David, the percentage increase that is. Well, 13 to 75 is about 5.
Yeah.
You can tell I'm an expert.
You can write it off to a
so
lot.
50 times. I think that 50 times is 5,000%.
At least.
Yeah. So it was a pretty serious issue. It actually was hauled onto Capitol Hill, where he was, he kept invoking the Fifth Amendment. Okay, but his claim that we'll touch upon later was that there's a need to turn a profit in order to research and develop new and better drugs. Yeah, okay, we'll touch upon that. I think most would agree this was a bit over the top, right? But there certainly is some validity, if not in the application of that idea, but certainly there is validity to that idea. But let's begin with the sources that we have. Okay, the sources of charging for a mitzvah. So interestingly, the Gemara in Bechorot, which we have on our sheet here, begins, and the Gemara, or the teaching of the Mishnah, the Gemara explains, is based upon this pasuk, this verse in Devarim. There definitely should be more copies. Yeah. Here we go. Good. Right? It's a one-page, two-sider. Okay. The pasuk says, Re'ei limadti etchem. Behold, see, I have taught you chukim u'mishpatim. I have taught you these laws, these judgments. Kasher tzivani Hashem Elokai la'asot kein. As Hashem, my God, has commanded me to do so, b'kerev haaretz. So we see here that the teaching of Torah that Moshe did, it was done kasher tzivani, as I was commanded to do so by Hashem, my God. The Mishnah in Bechorot speaks about hanotel sucharo ladun, a person who takes payment in order to be a judge, in order to judge cases. Dinav b'teilin, his judgments, the rulings are negated, are void. Laha'id, I want to take. I'm an expert witness. I'm going to be paid to offer testimony. I actually witnessed an event, and they want me to come and testify what I witnessed, and I say yes for a price. Eidotav b'teilin, right? His evidence, his testimony is considered negated, void. Lahazot ulakadesh. If I want to get paid in order to do the sprinkling of the mix of the water and the ashes of the red heifer upon someone who is ritually impure, I want to get paid for that. Ulakadesh meimav, or I want to get paid for the process of sanctifying that water for the sprinkling. Well, if he does that, meimav meima'ara, this special water is considered cave water. Afaro, efer makle, and the ashes of that red heifer are considered to be afar makle, regular. I don't know the English. I don't know what calcined ashes are. Okay, but whatever the case is, it's non-sanctified, no extra ability or purpose ashes. It's considered some burnt wood. That's all it is. The Gemara, right? Those who are following in the English, we're going right. I skipped the last half of the Mishnah. The following, he would go to about 7 lines down, bold letter Gimel Mem Gemara. Minani Mili. From where is this derived? Amar Yudam Arav Amar Kra. The pasuk says, the one we quoted above, Re'ei limadati etchem. See, I have taught you chukim mishpatim kasher tzivani Hashem Elokai, like Hashem my God has commanded me. Ma ani bechinam, just like I, Moshe, have taught you bechinam, without receiving any remuneration for my teaching. Af atem bechinam. And so too you must continue the teaching of Torah bechinam, without receiving any payment for it. Uminayim shemlo matzu bechinam shilamed b'sachar. Tamilomer emet kanei. Let's say I can't find someone who'll teach me for free. How do I know then that I should in fact pay him? The pasuk says emet kanei. Truth, you have to buy that. You have to acquire that. So if the only way for you to acquire Torah knowledge, emet, truth, is through paying for that, you must. So how do you know that a person can't say, hey, I paid tuition, I made sure that, my teachers, right, I paid for it, right? So now that I'm teaching, I'm going to also demand payment for it. Talmud Loma, the pasuk says, emet kanei va'al timkor. Emet, truth, needs to be acquired, va'al timkor, right? But don't sell it. You have to be willing to give it away for free. Now, according to this, right, so how does a rabbi? 1 second. Okay, class over. How does a rabbi, how do teachers, how do they command a salary? Right? So, quite honestly, a rabbi involves, it's all mitzvah, it's all under the, a teacher is clearly, a teacher who's teaching Torah is clearly, right, teaching Torah. The rabbi has a lot of other aspects also, right, which might not necessarily, but certainly it's a question there, right? And the Gemara also extends, right, it's all mitzvot. It's all mitzvot. Like a moel, right, doesn't charge. A person will ask, what's the usual amount, right? And he'll share that amount, but he doesn't charge. He doesn't charge, right? A person will, normally decide to give, but he doesn't charge for the mitzvah, right? There's not a charge for it. Now, in addition, the taking care of a person's bodily welfare, that the Gemara learns out is also included in, interesting, the pasuk, did I quote it or not? Yeah, actually on the back side of the page there. We're talking about there returning a lost object, right? Devarim Chaf Bet 22. Lo tiret shrachicha et seoni dachim v'talanta mehem hashet yisreim la'achicha. Should not see your brother's ox or sheep straying and ignore them. Rather, return them to your brother. And if your brother's not near you, you don't know who the owner is, bring it into your house. And let it be with you until your brother will seek it out. That's how the Gemara learns out that he must give what's called a siman, some identifying sign to show that he truly is the owner. V'hashevoto lo. Right? And you shall return. So the English says we shall return it to him. The Gemara learns out, the Gemara of Bava Kama learns out, v'hashevoto, you shall return him to him.
Yeah.
Meaning, when am I returning him to him? So this is letting us know that besides besides obligation to return a lost object to a person, there's also an obligation to return the person to the person, to help a person maintain their health, right? And to return their ability to function as a person, as a healthy person to the person. So that also is included in this mitzvah. So then, if this is the case, no one is going to really be offering their services, because it's very few who can afford to do all of this, certainly full-time, certainly in a serious manner, to do it for free. So the Mishnah, the Gemara actually goes on. And the Gemara asks a contradiction. The Gemara says, and the English is on the back side, right? The Hebrew is still continuing the Gemara over here. The English for this is on the back side of the page there. The Gemara said, if he's taking payment in order to do the sprinkling or the mixing, that invalidates the waters, invalidates the ashes. V'raminu, the Gemara brings a contradiction. Hanakadesh b'mei chatat, be'afar chatat, harezu mekudeshet. Okay? Not necessarily the most romantic of guys, but if under the chuppah, instead of giving her a ring, he gives her some of the ashes of the para aduma, right? A bit eclectic, I agree. Or he gives her the waters, mikudeshet. They are considered married. Now, why is this? Now, the Gemara says, or Rashi actually explains over here, that now we know that in a marriage, he has to give over something of value. He has to give us something of value. Okay? That's why one of the questions that Masada Kedushin, the person arranging the marriage, asks the witnesses under the chuppah, he shows them the ring and says, is this for sure a shaveh pruta? Is this worth the minimal amount of value, which is a pruta, which is about 3 to 5 cents? Right? But that's a question that he needs to show. He needs to show the ring to the witnesses and ascertain that it has that value. So there needs to be some value here in order for the kedushin to take place. Now, what's the value that I can get for it? I can sell it. I can sell my performance with it. I can sell the object. So therefore, we see that it can have value. The Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi says, Lo kashya. Kan bischar haba'a. I can charge for my bringing it. U miloi. And my drawing that water. So I can charge for the costs that are associated with it. The travel, the work involved. Kan bischar hazav v'kiddush. But I can't charge for the actual performance of the mitzvah. Okay, so I can charge some of the, what we call the residual expenses, right? Activities related to the mitzvah, right? But not for the mitzvah itself. Now, according to this, a doctor then, before we get to medicine, a doctor should not be allowed to charge for tending to his patients. As I mentioned to you, the Gemara on Bava Kama, that based on this pasuk, Vashevoto lo, it's a mitzvah to take care of a person. Right? And actually, in the very bottom over here, I also have from the Shulchan Aruch, and the first halacha in 336, Shin Lamed Vav is not the Torah Shut L'Rov L'Rapot. Permission is given to a doctor to heal. Mitzvah he, and it's a mitzvah for the doctor to do so. Uvichlal Pikuach Nefeshu, and it's included in saving lives. And if he holds himself back, Hareza Shofech Damim, right? Then he is spilling blood. Afilu Yesh Lo Mishir Fenu, right? And either there's someone else who might be able to do it. He's still considered a blood spiller. Shalom min akol adam zoch litrapot. Right? Not everyone has the merit to be healed by everyone. So you might be the one who's meant to do it. So there's a mitzvah for a doctor to heal. If that's the case, how can a doctor charge for that? He can charge for, according to the Gemara, he can charge for the travel there, right? But he can't charge for the actual healing that he's doing. So there's a set of svarim called the Nishmat Avram, which goes through all of these modern medical halachic questions. And he says that the Gemara's method of calculation would not work for today when a doctor's sole source of income is his practice of medicine. So it's not what we call sechar batela, right? It's not that it's preventing him from going to do something else, so we pay him for that. There is nothing else that he does, and he spent, nowadays, I remember when I was in high school, and at that point I was planning on pursuing a career in medicine. I remember when I heard, it must have been like 10th, 11th grade, I heard that the cost of a private medical school, was $10,000 a year. I thought to myself, oh my gosh, how could I even consider this? When I come out of there, I'll be so over my head in debt. How could I ever get past that? Now, if your kid's nursery comes in at under 10, you feel like you dodged the bullet, right? Okay, right? But nowadays, right, with all of the costs that go into that and all the time that goes into that, it's not that he's prevented from doing something else. This is what he does, right? And a similar question is raised about today's teachers and dayanim, that a lot of preparation and schooling went into it, and it's not, you can't say they're being paid, to prevent, because for keeping them away from their other job. There is no other job. If you want to have a good teacher for your kids, you want someone who is completely dedicated towards that teaching. Okay, so therefore the Nishmat Avram, the understanding based on a Tosfos also in Kesuvos, is that a person could charge that which they need to fully dedicate themselves to that practice and for the benefit of the population. So when you start factoring in the amount of time that went into it, the cost that went into it, the loans that need to be repaid, right? So doctors are certainly entitled to a proper salary, okay? And that's perfectly within the confines of Torah law. However, when you have a situation of someone who can't afford to pay, so then the doctor has an obligation to help that person even for free. And if the only doctor in town is refusing to do so, then the Beit Din the Jewish court has the authority to force him to do so, or that tzedakah, the city's tzedakah fund, must provide the funds for those people to receive the health care that they need. Okay, how about a situation where the sum that's being charged is exorbitant and the person agrees to pay that? Right? A person agrees to pay, this is the doctor's fee. So there we have an interesting Gemara in Yevamot, which discusses the case. That's on the back side of the sheet. A person was wrongly incarcerated by, well, whatever the case, we don't know who this person is. This guy's on the lam. He's running from the Beit HaSurin, from prison. And he needs to get across a river. And there's a guy there who's got a ferry who brings people across the river. Family told dinar ve'avirani, and the guy insisted, right? He offered an exorbitant price to get the guy to do it. Ein lo ella sicharo. All that person can demand is the normal going rate for a ride across the river. If he made a special trip, then he could charge him the normal going rate for a special trip. But this person was desperate, and therefore this person offered an exorbitant amount, right? Even though he agreed to it beforehand, he does not have to pay that. That is beyond. One can only charge what is a normal going rate. However, when it comes to a doctor, it's very different. We'll distinguish between a ferry ride for someone's life and a doctor taking care and treating someone for that person's life. Why? So the Ramban and others distinguish that when it comes to a ferry ride is a ferry ride. There is a set price. Again, if he's one of the passengers, there's a set price. If it's an exclusive, he chartered the boat, there's a set price. And that needs to be followed. However, when it comes to a doctor, there it's very different. You are hiring the expertise, the thinking, the opinion of, and therefore the course of action of this particular doctor. And you can't put a value on that. You can't put a price tag on that. You can't say, well, this is a lot more than it should be. Who's to say what it should be? How do you put a price on a person's mind, on a person's training, on a person's opinion? And you could have top doctors and they could have different opinions. It's not a set idea, it's not a set conclusion that these doctors will reach. And therefore, in such a case, if you accepted to pay a very high price, then you've got to pay that price. You can't come back and say afterwards, listen, I was desperate, that's why I agreed, but this is exorbitant and it doesn't make sense. You can make that calculation beforehand. You can't make that calculation afterwards. You know, they tell the joke of a person, right, who had an issue, and he said, I want the best doctors. Right? When it comes to my health, money is no issue. Right? And he keeps going from one top, right? Finally he gets the bill, he says, I have no money. Right? So what? Well, it comes to my health, money's no issue. Right? Right? Yeah, that is wrong. Perhaps the doctor should help out such a person if only they can help him, right? But if a person takes on that obligation to pay, then he must follow through on that. However, this is the case when it comes to medical expertise, but not when it comes to the issue of the day, to issue of drugs. Let's take a look again at the Shulchan Aruch on the bottom of the second side. So I don't find it in English, but I will translate. Number 3, Mi sheyesh lo samanim, someone who has drugs, herbs, v'chaveiro chola, and his friend is sick, v'tzarich lahem, and is in need of that medication, asur lo lahalo b'dameim yoter min hara'oi. Okay, and these are key words. It is prohibited for him to raise the price, yoter min hara'oi, more than that which is proper, fitting. V'lo, not only that, el afilu paskulo b'dameim harbe, even if he pledged that he'll give him an exorbitant sum, b'nei tzorech hasha'ah, because of his desperate need at that time. Shalomatsu samanim el biyado. This guy is the only manufacturer. Right? We're still within a certain period of time. I'm not sure how long it is for a drug. How long is it for a drug before the generics can kick in?
16 years.
I'm sorry?
16 years.
From the time
that you file the patent.
16
Yeah, but
years.
it can be extended.
But it can be
for those
extended,
two.
yeah.
But they're trying to stop
So,
this.
but I know there's something about an orphan drug status.
I'll explain
That's
it.
7
I'll
years.
explain that
It's
later.
a different kind of drug.
I understand, but why would that be less than a regular drug?
Because the orphan drug was never put through the FDA, that's why.
Well, it is, but it's under a special
Uh-huh.
program.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's...
So at a certain, well, it's before the generics have kicked in. This is the only manufacturer for it. Therefore, he pledged to give this exorbitant sum. Ein lo ella demehen. He does not have to give that exorbitant sum. He only needs to give demehem, their value. Now, once again, their value is, like we said before, yotem min hara'oi, more than that which is proper. Avol hitna v'schar harofei harbe. If a person agreed to pay a doctor a well above market price, that's different. Chayav litein lo, that you need to give him. Shechachmato machar lo, because the doctor, what he sold to you was his wisdom, his opinion. Ve'ein lo damim. And the Shulchan Aruch says you can't put a price tag on his wisdom, but you can put a price tag on, there is a market price when it comes to different medications. In other words, human wisdom is immeasurable, as opposed to a certain drug. Now, we have drugs that it's not just, this herb that's so unrealized that if you take some coriander and mix it with this, right? We're talking about complex molecular design. We're talking about sometimes years of research and tremendous amount of money that went into the R&D, the research. And do the pharmacists disagree over here?
Yeah.
No, clinical
I
trials.
disagree.
Okay,
You do?
Sure.
explain.
I don't disagree to the amounts, but it's a topic on its own. Okay?
Well, I mean,
every drug company is allowed, well, I'll just quickly say it, every drug company in the United States is allowed $400 million a year and don't have to show anything for it. Okay, because they just give that to them for research and development.
They're allowed, meaning what?
$400 million write-off.
A tax write-off. Okay,
For research, they don't have to research and develop nothing.
okay.
They get $400 million to write off. So they don't have to provide an invoice to say, oh, each little guy got this amount of dollars or whatever. it is.
Right.
The thing is that...
But they're spending $400 million, or up to $400 million.
That was about 3 years ago.
Okay.
So the issue is that the United States government, through the NIH Institute, is giving a lot of money for research on these drugs. And what happens is that these drug companies are using that...
Oh, they're using the government funding for the research.
So
I
everything
see.
that's being government funded...
Because that's different than a write-off. A write-off is money that I spent, but this here I'm receiving funding.
You're receiving funding from taxpayers who also help and research these drugs through institutes and whatever. And they use it as write-offs and they make money on these drugs, a lot of money.
Okay, I hear that.
But I don't want to go into the price.
Okay.
And start and
But in a certain way, the drugs today can be somewhat compared to the way the Shulchan Aruch is discussing a doctor, right? Meaning this drug might be something that took tremendous insight, and it wasn't like I said, they just happened to find out that if you drink this, it works, right? And priceless perspective and insight went into making this product, which does not have any parallel out there. Now, even with what you're saying, just 1 second, it could be that the government does give a lot towards research, but there certainly are cases where people need to raise the funds. In order for this to get to market, funds needs to be raised. And we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars needs to be raised. Now, the people who are the people who are investing in this, or the funds that are investing in this, it's a risk. They need to get the FDA approval. It's a risk. It's a risk that they might lose the entire investment if it doesn't work.
Sure.
Right? So now, the only way to get that funding is if the people know that if this does hit, there's going to be a serious payday. Otherwise, there won't be the investments, and these drugs won't come to market. Again, I'm not defending the whole Shkreli incident, but something that made it out in the news was that there was a recording or something, or I don't understand what it was, of his telling investors, at a certain point, we're going to make billions, right? And that has turned many a stomach, right? But at the same time, if he's there trying to sell this to investors in order to make it happen, I think that case was he took an existing drug and just bought it and then went off. But when we're talking about the investing into a drug where it's a 1 in 10 chance, right? So then, to me, it makes sense that there does need to be a payday for the investors. Otherwise, there won't be investors. But at the same time, it can't be something that is gross and beyond. Yes.
So, Rabbi, in that development life cycle, well, in Shkreli's case, you could do a cost per unit for the acquisition for buying the existing drug. You could do
again in a case where I'm buying an existing drug.
It was still like 280 million or something. So you factor that in, then you factor in the inspection, the lights, the everything, and then don't we have a rule that most proprietors it's a 6% markup? You can make 6%.
Can I just
let me answer. Let me answer. The Torah is it's a 6% more than the going rate. Right? But when there is no real going rate, then it's hard to apply that.
But the going rate would be your cost.
No. Let's say I find a diamond and I put minimal effort into it, right? And now I want to sell it. We don't say how much work did go into it. We look at what's the going rate for such a diamond, right? Yeah.
Can I just say, this drug that we're talking about here is pretty unique. What happened? Okay, it's happening across all drugs. There's a drug called Harvoni, which has come up by Gilead Sciences, which was researched and brought to market, okay, for hepatitis C. So what their philosophy was that if they bring out this drug and cure people, you won't have to have a liver transplant, okay? So they made the drug $1,350 per tablet, okay?
And
this more than what this guy's done. Because this guy's been brought down already by 4 compounding pharmacies, which I'll tell you about. So this drug, Harvoni, by Gilead Sciences, is $1,350 a pill. It's an 8 to 12 week course where you have to take one a day. It comes to anywhere from $90,000 to $120,000 for the course. So their philosophy was
the cost of a liver transplant.
You take this drug and you're not going to have a liver transplant. It's got a 98% success rate. Wonderful. But I can tell you now that there's other drugs. We're going through a terrible period now with this happening. Okay, you can't put a cap on that price. So what happens is now the doctors have to write a prescription and say how sick you really are before the insurance will even consider paying for that drug. Okay, so that's a lot of money. So now I know in India, the Dr. Reddy's, I don't know if anyone's heard of them, a generic company, they're going to be making this drug now as well, under Gilead Sciences on a license, so they can distribute that to the African countries and the lower income countries. So what I'm trying to say is, when I bring out a drug like Prilosec, everyone knows Prilosec. I can tell you now, when that drug came out, how many surgeons were done out of business and how many people's lives were saved from ulcers. You know, the H. pylori eventually came after that. But Prilosec saved a lot of people's lives. And that drug did not cost $1,300 a pill.
Right.
It cost $60. I remember I had the pharmacy at the time. It was $60 for a month's course. You know, and after maybe 3 months, a person might stop taking it. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, what price do you put on a person's health?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what goes into making the price of that drug? That's
Yeah.
the demand.
And that's why I said that
Don't fear the
that
person.
that min haroi, right? The term that the Shulchan Aruch used, yoter min haroi, more than that which is fitting, more, right? It should, right? That is the devil is in the details, as we say,
So I'm
right?
thinking-
How do we determine what is going to be that roi, taking into account?
Yeah.
Right now, it's not going to be going from $13 up to $750 a pill, right?
It costs $2 a pill, by the way. Irvine.
Make it.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
the ingredient
That's,
cost.
Yeah.
that's not quite
The
fair.
ingredient cost.
The cost of the lights, the cost of the QC people,
No,
the cost
right,
of the QA,
right.
it's
Yeah.
probably more
No,
like
I said the
There's-
cost of
$15 a
Yes,
pill.
there's a lot
The
to take
ingredient
into
cost.
account,
Right.
right?
The ingredient cost is $2. I will make an absolute fortune at 10. Okay, for that market. So what I'm saying is that, you know, it's another era. I'm not going to say much anymore, but it's another era we're hitting now. There's a lot of other drugs I can bring up. There's a fortune of generics out there, just screamed up in price. Creams have just gone up from $5 to $130. I mean, you can't believe you're all hiding behind this insurance wall. Where you walk into a pharmacy, you pay $5 or $10. You don't know what's going on the other side.
Right, but your premiums reflect it.
The premiums are going to reflect that you're going to be paying like
They're not going to, they are reflecting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is that someone has to come forward, or somebody, or some people have to get angry enough to go forward and actually take on these people.
Yeah,
Because it's become absolutely,
yeah,
it's getting beyond outrage.
yeah.
I have a question
Yeah.
about this.
Yes.
So let's take the case of the pill that went from, let's take Shkreli,
Yeah.
13 to 750. Was the $13 charge paying for what you called the payoff for the drugs that don't work, that don't make it through the trials, which I would characterize as cost of capital, which I'm sure you'll understand. So there has to be a cost of capital that's in the teens or something like that. So did the $13 pay for the costs of the drug, the development, and cost of capital, or did it need to go to 750 in order to cover for all the
No.
costs
No.
and
No.
cost and cost of
Let me
capital?
just speak up. The Daraprim used to be a malaria drug. It's an anti-malarial drug.
What is
One
the
week.
Shkreli thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was an anti-malarial drug in South Africa, where I come from,
Yeah, yeah.
in the 1960s. You used to take one a week before you went to the...
So it's an old drug. It's not something that just got invented.
No, but what it does is it cures the AIDS patients when they get the side effect, the cancer, they get...
Kaposi sarcoma.
Kaposi or something.
Yeah.
And what it does is it works on Kaposi, taking one a day. But they worked out the ingredient cost of that drug is about $1. So there's a...
That's the ingredients.
ingredient. The compound pharmacy in San Diego got permission to make the drug for 90 tablets, 3 months supply, for $99.95, and they add leucovorin to the drug, which is to make it, and they can compound it, make it.
Okay.
So the development costs are way back in the past. None of
Oh,
that.
it's got
None of the
nothing to do
cost of capital is
No.
just a straight gouge.
So that's simply gouging.
That's a straight gouge.
That's simply gouging.
It's not a mitzvah.
But when you're bringing something to market, I'm saying,
Absolutely.
there are other costs and there are investments but it's hard to justify anything getting up to the 750 or the 1,000.
1,350.
Yeah, the Gemara Kedushin says, Tov shebarofim legehenim, which
The doctors should go
says
to hell?
the best of the doctors are going to hell. Right? Now, this is a strange Gemara, especially we have many Jewish doctors, many fine Jewish doctors. One explanation that Rashi gives is very simple. It's the good doctors who will often not tend to people who can't afford it. So if they shut out, that's what the Gemara is referring to, those who shut, some explains it's on those who think that they are the doctors. Tov has a gematria of 17. Tov has a gematria of 17. And we say 18 brachot in our Shmona Esrei, one of them being Refa'enu, God heal us. So the Hasidic word is the Tov Shebarofim, the doctor who only says 17 and leaves out the blessing of heal us, God, because he's got it under control. That's the person. But Rashi learns, that's more of a Hasidic word. Rashi learns more simply, the doctor who is so full of, is so top level that he'll only accept the top paying patients, and those who are in need he will refuse to help, right? So those people, it's about them that the Gemara says legehenim. And certainly if we're looking to gouge as much as we can, so that's what that Gemara is talking about. The Gemara in Tanit tells a story that Abaye was told that a person was considered a greater level in heaven than he. And he wanted to know who this person was. And the person was a doctor. And he wanted to see, what does this doctor do? And this doctor would treat the poor the same way that he treated the rich. Not only that, but actually he didn't treat them the same way. He would treat them better. Meaning that, first of all, the payment bin was set aside from where everyone else was sitting. And that way, a poor person could go there and just act like he was putting something in, so he shouldn't be embarrassed, but no one would know that he was not putting anything in, and he would not demand anything from him. Right? He made sure everything was done in a very modest way. When poor Talmidei Chachamim, scholars, would come to him, in addition to not charging them, he would arrange a whole meal for them after the procedure in order to strengthen them. So, to summarize, mitzvot need to be done without payment. In today's world, if you want to have a competent teacher, you want to have a competent judge, you want to have, the way a Beit Din works is that the two litigants will pay what they call schar b'teila. They'll each pay, whatever it is, $150 an hour, right, to cover the costs of those judges sitting there per hour. So, the Beit Din is not getting paid government salaries like the court system, like the U.S. court system is, right? So they'll be paid schar b'teila, the schar for their time. And it goes further. People have put in a lot of education in order to devote themselves fully to their job without having to worry about other things, so they can command a salary, but at the same time, it should not be one that is gouging. And when it comes to a doctor, there the Shulchan Aruch differentiated between an exorbitant sum for a doctor, because the doctor, it's his mind that goes into the decision, as opposed to for the herbs, the drugs, because there it has a simple market value. And we mentioned that nowadays, the drugs that are developed are somewhere in between the herbs and the doctor, because a tremendous amount of ingenuity went into that, and a tremendous cost went into that. And in order to continue to send the best minds and the necessary funding into these enterprises, which will produce the future drugs, they need to be compensated well. But there's a difference between well and an astronomical reach which will bankrupt the entire system and leave many people in need without the ability to get that which they to get that. Yes, Steve.
I have a lot I'd like to say, but I won't because of the time constraints or whatever. But one of the drugs that I worked on while I was working at Allergan was meant not to be a cure for a particular condition, but rather to slow the development of the symptoms of that condition. And as a result, we
Just to slow the symptoms while the disease rages on, or to
it's
slow.
not raging. We're not talking raging.
Okay.
But we're talking about a dementia, for example.
Okay.
That develops over time, and and if you could somehow slow the development of dementia,
Okay.
then it's better quality of life for the patient. Whatever. We had to plan on running clinical trials for at least 4 years. Now, depending upon what the particular drug is that you're testing, what it's to be used for, there are some drugs that are used once or possibly twice to bring about their required action. Others you get on and you stay on for the rest of your life. And so that's one of the factors that determines how long you have to test it and to what extent in animals and in humans, a lot of stuff. This particular drug, for what we were studying it, we got to 4 years and found that there was no significant benefit to taking the drugs.
How many tens of millions of dollars later was that?
I don't know the amount,
Yeah.
but you have to consider that.
Yeah.
And you said 1 in 10. It's probably closer to 1 in 100 drugs that starts off in the cycle of development that actually makes it to market. Things have changed drastically over the course of the years with pharmaceutical companies, where it used to take maybe 10 to 15 years to get a drug approved through the FDA. A lot of that was downtime where nothing was being done to even evaluate the application. And so FDA made changes to the way they did things. Industry started paying a fee to have their applications, and as a result of that fee structure, the FDA was able to hire more people and ensure that at least an initial evaluation would be done within a year or even a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it.
I agree. That's why I say yoter min hara'ui. That is the crux of the issue over here. When Shulchan Aruch says more than that which is fitting, that's the big issue. Yes.
So, but there is a model. You can know how much you spent on that cost of capital failed clinical trial, apportioning it out to the things.
That's
that
true.
market.
But how about the other 9 or 99 that I spent on?
Right. I'm just saying, and you can know how much you spent on the development to get the patent for the one that made it and through its clinical trial, and then the cost of the lights, the quality assurance people, the ongoing manufacturing processes.
That's what I'm saying.
You can factor all that in, and if you really did a true cost accounting, it's not going to be just the cost of the active pharmaceutical ingredients and the $2.
No.
Probably it's going to be more like 50 or 60. But then, from a tort perspective, don't we have this model of after that cost, 6% more is.
Again, 6% is when something that's available all around, and there's a regular market value for it. So what is right? That's what Ona is. Not for this.
Like
not if you've got the only one.
If you have
I'm telling you.
attorney,
I'm telling you. Not if you have the only one.
Then?
I'm sorry.
That's a choice.
David, what you want to say?
It seems to me that we're putting the word value in the same context like the Public Utility Commission determining electrical rates. Drugs are not electrical rates. In Africa, the government gives subsidies to gasoline. People have to have gasoline to get around. They have to have drugs to live. but are they in the same category?
No.
I mean, value
That's good.
is not an objective concept. It is very subjective to
Yeah,
all kinds of things.
yeah.
But this is
And that's what we said in terms of the doctors, that you can't put a price tag on it where it's purely their thinking. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not a choice.
yeah. Joe?
Well, I was just gonna ask, I mean, as far as the mitzvah, I recall back in the 80s when HIV came about, and that was a death sentence for a lot of people. Now it seems people have that due to the incentive that drug companies had to come out, and
Yeah.
they had to invest billions of dollars, but it seems like
Yeah.
people are able to live. So isn't there a mitzvah in providing life for these
Yeah.
people that are?
Yes, yes, yeah. Certainly, the giving of the drug is a mitzvah, right? But it also needs to be compensated for. And like we said, they need to be compensated well, but not egregiously. Yeah.
Again, going back to my neighbor's point on value. Normally, market value is dependent on supply and demand. In this environment, we have a third factor called the government that takes money by force, by threats, through the IRS to supply hospitals to provide a service like a liver transplant.
Okay.
And so what happens obviously is the hospital administrator determines not what the market value is, but what he can extract from government and pads the bill
Yeah.
accordingly.
Yeah.
And so then the next step is the drug company or whoever establishes the price for Sovaldi says, okay, the inflated government-induced price of liver transplant is such, so I'm going to peg the price of our drug accordingly to that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's-
yeah. It can be a vicious cycle. Let's take one more point, and then we need to bench. Yes,
This
Irvine.
has nothing to do with medicine. But you brought up, David, you brought up the fact of values. Who gets paid for what you do shows society's values. You would never go to a lawyer and say, I'm not paying you, can you do it free? You would never go to a doctor and say, can you pay free? But you go to an artist, a writer, a musician, an actor, an architect, you ask for free. Everyone in the creative arts,
Yeah.
constantly asking to do things free.
Yeah. I think Warren Buffett, I think I'm quoting him when he said that we live in a crazy society where a great teacher is rewarded with thank you notes, and a person who can detect an inconsistency in the price of securities is rewarded with billions of dollars. Yeah, yeah, that is interesting. Okay, let's stop here.
If I may,
Yeah.
just to finish.
No, let's stop. Otherwise,
You can terminate.
it's going to keep on. I want to let people.